So we'll just start at the top, and you see there's way too much information for us, so we're just based on where we've been so far, and I'll try to interact with you more. We can jump over some stuff. But the question, or what the title is of the session is what the world wants to do to your mind. So tell me, what does the world want to do to your mind? What are your inputs on that?
It wants us to believe that there is no objective truth, that we can define truth in ourselves, and I can have my own truth, and you can have your truth.
Good.
Closely related, the concept of tolerance. Everybody needs to be tolerant of everybody.
Nothing more intolerant than tolerance in today's world.
Yes.
Good. What else?
It's the worship world we want.
Oh, worship, yeah, worship, the worship thing. And that's probably the very start of it all, isn't it?
Music is not amoral.
Yeah, well, and going back to the beginning, what is truth? If there is no truth, if my truth is my truth and your truth is your truth, then everything's unmoral.
Yeah.
And music, and we can go for all sorts of things. On the way over today, we had the ladies in one car and guys in the other car, and got talking, and Pastor, what are we going to do? And here it is, it's going to come up there public on Facebook. And here's people just living publicly in ways that it just flips everything right on its head. And then if you dare say something about it as if there is some moral standard, then you're the bad person at this point. So, good. What else? What does the world want to do to you? Yeah.
The world wants us to believe that salvation is worked for.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you tell me I'm not. I've been working hard. Yeah. And you tell me that's not enough. We just had 2 funerals. I'm going to bury the lady next Saturday. And she was a dear believer, but her extended family is all works, technically. And then you're the bad person for saying, even suggesting that maybe they're not good enough. Yeah, good. The short version is going to be this. The world wants to turn everything upside down so that you are your own God and truth is your own truth. Rather than God being God and He being the determiner of truth. That's the short version of all of it. Let's go to Romans 12. This is what we're supposed to be opening up in this session in thinking. So Romans 12, 1 and 2, these are verses that if you don't have memorized, doesn't matter how old you are, you can still read them over and over and over and over again and study them out and think about them, and before you know it, you're rattling them off without even knowing that you just memorized them. But I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is a good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And really, we're narrowing it down mainly to the first part of verse 2. Don't be conformed to this world. But we will go through other stuff here. Verse 1, I beseech you therefore, based on all 11 chapters of Romans so far. People are messed up. They deserve God's wrath. You ever notice that with people around you in today's world? Of course you do. Part of what we need to understand in Romans 1, 2, and 3, 1 especially, is that people are messed up and they not only deserve God's wrath, they are right now experiencing God's wrath. Because God in His justice and in His wrath says, you want to go that direction, you refuse to accept me. Just read Romans 1. I will let you go and do what you want to do. And that in itself is an expression of the wrath of God. So what are people experiencing? They're experiencing the misery of broken relationships and twisted sexuality and all of those things. And that is, they don't have to wait for hell, the lake of fire, to experience God's wrath. They're experiencing it now. But then God provides the way to be justified, to be declared righteous, to be forgiven, to be changed in chapters 4 and 5, and that's through Christ, through faith. And here, this is covering what you had talked about people want to earn their salvation. And then 6 through 8, the believer is sanctified, is made more holy, is set apart for God in God's use. 9 through 11 is kind of a, hey, come on in. 9 through 11 is this parenthesis speaking about Israel and the place Israel comes in. This starts for you there. But God keeps his promises, and God promised Israel a land and a nation, and God keeps those promises. Therefore, chapter 12, verse 1, you present your bodies a living sacrifice to God. Interesting, the tenses, and I don't want to go into this a lot. This really isn't the core of what we're doing. But this presenting of our bodies it seems to be a once and for all thing. Lord, you got. You could look at it as the blank sheet of paper. Lord, I've signed my name to the bottom of the sheet of paper. Here's my life. You can fill in the blanks. That type of thought process. We're giving ourselves to God. It's our bodies. It's not just my heart, my feelings, or whatever yours. This is practical, lived out Christianity that God's going to use us. It's a living sacrifice. It's constant. It's continuous. It's living every moment for God. It's acceptable. It's pleasing to God. It's reasonable. It's logical. Is the word. It's service. It's your reasonable service. Your logical ministry, and this is a word used for the priest's ministry day after day after day. This is liturgical ministry, something that we do. It's logical. When you think about what Christ has done for us, the changes he's made, who God is, who we are, what sin is, what the world wants to do to us, it's logical for us to say, Lord, you got me, and I'll live for you every moment. But then in verse 2, the sense of this is stop allowing yourself to be conformed to it. This is one of those things where there's a tense involved that could be middle voice, not tense, but the voice could be middle or passive. Passive means it's being done to me. Middle is I'm doing this to myself type of thing. So this could be one or the other of those. So it could be me actually cooperating with the world to be conformed to it. Or it could be the world stomping me into its mold, passively. Either one, you could see where the reality could set in with us. That we could be cooperating with the world and actually being formed to the world around us. I'll use this illustration. Just in the last week, we've had a mess in America. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't watch the news. I never watch the news. I will read it, and I'll read it from several different sources because I don't trust any of them. So I'll read this side and I'll read this side, and I'll try to figure out what's going on. But I did hit one guy, one kid and his friend, Columbia University in New York, stood in front of the doors of this hall and said, no, you're not going in. They didn't do their math. There's only two of us, and there's all of them. They just tried to do the right thing, period. I'm not going to swallow your stuff. I'm not going to allow you to push me into your mold. I'm just going to stand up and do the right thing. Now, God got them out of there safely, but come to find out, this kid is the grandson of somebody who's fairly publicly well known in America as a Christian leader. Whether you agree with him or not, he's fairly well known, but he said, no, I'm not going to be conformed into the world's mold and believe what they're believing. I'm going to stand up for what's right, no matter what how the math adds up. And that's a good way to illustrate what this is talking about. Our default since the fall in Adam and Eve has been to allow the world to mold us. But the sense, again, is to stop allowing this to happen and then actively be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So if anything, we have to say our minds are going to be actively involved in battling what the world wants to do to us, this conforming thing. Does it make sense? You may have heard in verse 2, the transformation thing is the metamorphosis. And if you haven't heard the butterfly illustration, that's used on verse 2, where the caterpillar goes in and there's a transformation, a total transformation that takes place from the inside out. And that's what's going to have to happen in me and in you in order to not be conformed to the world, to stop being conformed to the world. God's going to have to change me. And again, what is the world trying to do to us? The world's trying to make us into victims. So I'm just a passive rider in this thing. I can't stand up and do what's right with God's help and all that kind of thing. So again, because of our need for the gospel, because Jesus came and saved us, we should be fully devoted to God. And then this means standing up against what the world is wanting to do to us.
So how do we do that?
Right, we will get there. Yeah, we'll get there. So that's kind of just introductory. I'm not going to take the time to do the Genesis study with us, but just follow with me that God, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The world wants to turn that upside down. And then we come to the creation of man. Well, let's, before we even get there, the 6 days of creation. So my home church in Cincinnatus, New York, without a pastor, looking around, shopping, and I joke about this, how you don't shop for a pastor. You go to all the pastor stores and you try to shop for a pastor. And they found this guy who sounded really good and he really wanted to come. And he was, the church was almost ready to vote on him, and the old deacon was talking, and Genesis 1 came up. And the guy says, I wasn't there. I don't really know if it was 6 real days. And the guy says, I'm just a dumb farmer. I can read that. So the world wants to turn that upside down. The creation of mankind, male and female created he them. Man should leave father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they'll be one flesh. That's God's design for marriage. You just read it, it's there. And the world turns all of that upside down. Well, how did that happen in Genesis 3? And just go from memory.
Did God really say?
Yeah, did God really say? So questioning several things about God. I don't think God really meant that. Or I think another part of it is, if God were a good God, he wouldn't be keeping you from this good thing. Because when she saw it was good to the eyes and good for food, and even good to make you wise, then she ate it. So right from the very beginning, Satan's tools have been to make us, in our minds, doubt God's goodness. So we doubt who God is, and then makes us, in our minds, doubt what God has said. And it hasn't changed since then. The methods have changed, but the message has not changed. So anything else you think of that come to your mind about Genesis 1, 2, 3, creation, fall?
Distinctions, like in those chapters, that's where we learn the distinction between good and evil, distinction between humans made in the image of
Yeah.
God and animals who are, and our world wants to treat animals the same as humans, or even
Yeah.
sometimes more important. The distinction between male and female.
If we can change the earth, if we mold it, but now we're not.
Right. Yeah, as soon as we start just leaning in the direction of questioning God's goodness or how God created everything, as soon as we start leaning that, nothing makes sense. I mean, one of the tools, and I don't really cover it, and where I thought about going for 50 minutes is all of the tools that are being used against us. But one of the tools is that nobody talks with each other anymore. We'll text to each other, and then if we disagree, we just don't answer. And whatever happened to meeting together with God's word at the center, and you talking back and forth, and okay, what about this verse? Well, that's true. You ever play Battleship? Yeah, yeah. Okay, what about this passage? Yeah. Okay, so now we're filling in the blanks on both sides of the Battleship game board here by having this give and take, acknowledging hits scripturally. But that doesn't happen anymore. Now we want a safe space where nobody will even say anything I'm offended by. And that's a really effective tool that Satan's using. That was not pretty good. I want to do more work there on your page 2. I tend to try to use Bible language, and I had hinted at earlier when we were talking about the psychological diagnoses. I try to use Bible terms relating to, say, PTSD, instead of saying that, I was hurt badly and I'm really fearful right now. What? That's happened to me. And I had months on end where I was waking up in the middle of the night reliving it. My wife has. She works with behavioral students. And one in particular, she was going months and months and just waking up with these dreams that were just terrifying her. And by using Bible terms, it actually leads you to a Bible prescription of God, fear not. And so here's just a few things that we see about man's mind. It's vain. What's another word for that? Yeah, futile.
Self-love.
Yeah, self-love, empty. In its imaginations, in what it's thinking, the ideas it comes up with. So you say, I've been thinking. Okay, that may be good, it may be bad. But without God, I've been thinking leads us really nowhere good. Or nowhere dependably good, might be a good way to put that. In your verses, letter B, man's mind has become reprobate. And we don't use that word a lot, but it's rejected, you threw it out. I just threw away a chainsaw chain this morning. It was no good, it was reprobate.
It's hard though.
It was hard. It was one more sharpened. No, it's done.
Yeah.
It's done.
Hopefully recycling.
It doesn't work anymore. Boy, if you tell the world that their brain doesn't work, It doesn't make you very popular. So you might not want to go just straight and tell them, your brain's not working. You invite them to have a conversation, invite them to have a discussion about this. But notice under B, they didn't like to retain God in their knowledge, so God gave them over. I want to figure out any way possible to edit God out of my life. God says, well, if you do that, you're not going to be thinking clearly. Your thinking is going to be worthless. So again, what does the world want to do? Your mind wants to remove God, and then your mind thinking will be empty, useless, doesn't work. Letter C, carnal or fleshly, and then full of enmity against God. You're actually fighting against God. And it's easy to think about this with other people. And you will have neighbors you can think of, maybe even family members you can think of, who you see these things applying to. But understand that the world is trying to shoehorn us into this. So it's possible that we may be here at times, even as forgiven sinners, as justified, we may be fitting this, because we're to stop allowing this to happen. And letter D, man's mind has become blinded by Satan as to believe the glorious gospel of Christ. And again, Satan, the world is doing this. Here's just one more bunny trail of the ways that he does this, is by distracting us with way too much information. A statement that I've used a lot through the years is most believers are educated beyond the level of their obedience. And in my counsel, I tend to think a little more information is going to help. I tend to think that way. When sometimes I found the most effective thing to say, how'd you do on your homework? I didn't do it. I'm going to go home and do it, and I'll see you when you get it done. You have all the information you need to make that next step of obedience in your life. Go and do it. And they're blinded. Again, letter E, man's mind has become full of vanity, futility, emptiness, very similar to letter A. Ephesians 4 is a marvelous chapter. It'll take you a few months to study through it if you really take your time and work at it diligently. But this I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you henceforth, from here on out, don't walk like the Gentiles do in the vanity of their mind. Which means that unbelievers are walking with airheads. They're just not thinking clearly.
Interesting contradiction of terms, being full of vanity.
Yeah, isn't that, yeah.
Full of emptiness.
Full of hot air, might be the way we put it today, but full of empty. Focused on earthly things, letter F. Boy, how easy is that for us? Here's one more bunny trail. I thought at first that Facebook and other social media was going to distract me by the things that were being said, by what somebody might be saying on it. But what it's wound up doing to me is the algorithms feed me what I want to hear. How does it know what I want to hear? Because I like stuff. And when you like stuff, it just gives you more. So I only hear the same thing over and over again that I want to hear. And I hear a lot of it. And you just scroll one more page, one more thumb swipe, one more thumb swipe. And you're just overwhelmed by information that you already have. And why don't you just get on about life, Delavan, instead of swiping one more time? So that's interesting to me, but focused. That's where my focus is at that point, where I'm swiping for one more thing that I can hit like to, or show Betsy, this is so neat, you gotta see this. One more meme that I can put on. We have a family messenger feed that we run between us, and And there's usually 2 or 3 memes a day that the family sends back and forth, and it's fun way to connect. But if that's what our focus is, what an empty line. And Satan doesn't even have to get us to sin horribly. All he has to get us to do is be distracted enough we don't accomplish anything for God. Letter G, alienated from God, an enemy to God, we've already covered that. Fleshly, again, we've already covered that. We're just thinking about the stuff, the fleshly stuff. And then defiled. Anything else you think about to add to the Bible terms about our mind?
I'm just looking at the content of this book.
Yeah.
The first chapter is called Information Gluttony.
Yes.
I've never heard that term
Yeah.
before.
Oh, it's a marvelous term.
Exactly.
Yeah,
what it
I'm
is.
looking forward to reading
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Information
Again, I
gluttony.
don't know if I'll like it or not,
Yeah,
but
no.
yeah, information gluttony, just,
In all this, we could agree to it as Christians, we know
yeah.
that, but it's all by the grace of God and the prayer of Him. If we don't go to Him begging Him to help us to see through this.
Yeah, I did not cover that
Yeah,
well
we don't.
in verse 1 of Romans 12, by the mercies of God.
And in verse 3,
Yeah.
grace.
Grace and mercy, yes.
I don't know if one of those applies to mine. What about laziness?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for certain.
Yeah, because you
Right.
cannot research something.
I think I cover that sometime in the future here, but I'm entitled. I deserve. Sometimes it's just you couldn't write a comedy sketch better than what real life is on some of these college campuses this past week. So you come in violently and you take over this campus building, and then you whine and complain because they're not bringing you bottled water, and you might be dehydrated by the end of the week. It's just,
Can I just mention
Yeah.
the frat, did you hear about the frat boys? There was just a group of frat boys that they went and raised an American flag in the midst of all of the
Yeah.
pro-Palestinian, and they just faced them down. They just circled around the flagpole and held the flag up and laughed at all of the pro-Palestinian. And someone started a GoFundMe to get them a party to thank them for doing
that's
that.
funny, that's funny.
And it's up to $500,000.
That's funny.
It was like $400,000 the last I
hilarious.
checked.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, was that UNC, North Carolina?
I don't know if it, yeah, I think so. Not
I mean, there's so much going on, so many
It's-
different,
So there's some funny
directions.
things in the
Yeah.
midst of it too, but
Pastor.
Yeah.
And then Congress turns around and passes that law, basically trying to criminalize
Yeah,
change.
so that was yesterday, that we passed this anti-Semitism bill. So you already have how many laws about stuff like that? But basically what it does is way down in here, it's only 5 pages, but tucked way down in there is this thing that says, if you suggest that the Jews killed Jesus, that's anti-Semitic. Now, as we take things in context, the Bible in context, you would say, we all were responsible, and God worked through this and this and this. God was ultimately responsible. But there's several passages you could not read now, legally, to save the Jews. You killed him. Well, that's anti-Semitic. You're in prison. You're shut down. So, that was yesterday.
I believe we defend that by saying, that's not what I said.
Yeah,
I'm just quoting you, Jesus. Is that going on?
I doubt it. Not knowing our world. So page 3, these are just the title, the chapter headings of Lies Men Believe. Interesting just reading through the titles. Lies about God. The world would love us to believe that God is just like I am. God doesn't really care about whether I do this pet sin or not. I can earn God's favor in many ways to God, to church, taking with it. Lies about ourselves, I'm not responsible for my actions. And then you could extend that, I'm not responsible, I think that's not under work, but you're not responsible to put food on my table, pleasure and entertainment can satisfy me. Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of these, our churches are filled with people that believe these things. We've already been conformed to the image, to the world's mold. I'm the master of my destiny, I just have to try harder. Lies about sin, lies about sexuality, lies about marriage and family, lies about work and wealth, lies about circumstances, lies about the world, etc. And a lot of, if you just look at those chapter headings, a lot of what we hear in the news each week, it falls under several of those at the same time. Just put that in because it was an interesting way of understanding some of the lies. So here's where we're getting to what means does the world use to mold my mind, and this was one of the things we were interested in. So let me just hold up a few books for us. These are not necessarily evangelical books or even Christian books, but close to 40 years ago, Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. This is on your notes on page 4. But Amusing Ourselves to Death. What is amusement? I don't want to think, right? Is not. Muse, think. Amusement is I don't want to think. And man, oh man, what an amazing thought that is, amusing ourselves to death. We want to scroll another page just to not have to think for 5 more minutes. In however many other things we do like that. This, not a Christian book per se, but watching what we watch. Again, I didn't put the, 2001, so 23 years ago. Went through a lot of the TV sitcoms and shows and stuff, and just, so here's what you're going to be getting. Intriguing read. Worldview, what was the worldview of those shows? Here's another one, Alan Bloom, New York Times, writer. Closing of the American Mind, 40 years ago. And it was just basically doing a history of where we were in 1987 about some of the thought processes. This one is a more recent Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Call it identity. Identity politics, you may have heard the word. He wrote it, I think I put here, no, I didn't put it down there. He's trying to make sense out of why does it make any sense at all in America for somebody to say, I feel like I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. Why does that make any sense at all? Our grandparents would have laughed at us. Our parents probably would have laughed at us. But what? So he traces through, so this is a more updated, only from a fairly Christian perspective, the closing of the American mind. But walking through the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, but then more recently, Marx in the 1800s, and the whole development of the oppressor-oppressed mentality. And then you bring Freud into the whole thing, and the whole sexual distortions and flipping sex on its head, and identifying yourself now by sex in your sexual practices. And then you tie that together with oppressor-oppress. Pastor, and we've had this, young man went to Bible college, who is now married to his boyfriend, to his husband. And that I'm the oppressor because I will not affirm him in his identity which has nothing to do with truth. So we've taken God and ejected God from our lives. We've flipped truth upside down. And there's a great example of how it worked. But that's what he does with this, and this was the hardest book I've ever read. He uses big words that I don't understand. So he's put a more accessible one, Strange New World, where he puts it in more my terms, my farmer terms. But those are, again, describing some of the ways. So our identity is a huge way, rather than looking, as we started out, with truth. We're going through we have parallel things going on at Cornerstone right now. Well, one of those parallel things is we're going through this video series called Road Trip to Truth. It's kind of a man on the street interview type of thing, where they go onto the college campuses. What is truth? Is there such a thing as truth? Do you think there's any such thing as absolute morality? And then they take the little clips, and then you go and interview the Bible scholars, quote unquote, the specialists, or whatever you think of that kind of format. But that's one of the things we're doing right now. And our world's just upside down as it relates to truth.
As Christians, our identity is based on facts, what God
Correct.
has said in His
Correct.
Word. That's
Yeah.
our identity.
Yeah.
But this satanic ideology that's all around us, these people believe that their identity is based on their feelings. So you can't talk to them. You can't challenge their thoughts because you're attacking their identity by even trying to talk. It's amazing.
It is. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, the people that you're coming up against in this battle. My wife's uncle grew up in backwoods Maine, Temple, Maine, and he's now 89 years old. He spent 50 years as an engineer with the state of Maine, and for a while he was the chief bridge engineer in Maine. There's a guy who understands facts and understands how truth works. But then when he retired, he started writing some of his memories of growing up in a dysfunctional home out in the sticks and the abuses and all of this. And just, in his foreword. Now, some of you might remember things differently than this, but this is my truth. And I hope you didn't make bridges that way when we're driving across. But yeah, it makes no sense what people are doing with what they call truth. It is just so upside down. Disney, we have a bunch of Disney DVDs that are kind of cute. But there's just about every single Disney movie has really nasty theology. And if you're using it as an opportunity to so kids, what do you think about that? That's one thing you can use it to do. But we live in a lot of Disney theology in 2025. The screens everywhere. Go out to eat. You're trying to talk to your wife across the table, and there's just screens up there. And maybe I could just go sit on her side, and you turn around, there's 3 screens over here that she's being distracted by too.
Right.
And our phones are going off, and I mean, you have a conversation with somebody, and people are just constantly pulling their phones out because we're distracted. And overloaded, and the information gluttony, I did use that. I did put that in there. Perpetual novelty was the second chapter in that book. Always has to be something new, something funny, a new joke, a new whatever. And then the social media echo chamber, I've already commented on that. So what do we do about it? Here's Wayne's question. We have 7 minutes, page 5. Use caution and insulate yourself from the world's thinking. And there's 9 suggested Bible themes there about the fellowship, who are you sharing your life with, the fellowship of the world, the fashion and lust, the desires of the world, the course of the world, the God of the world, the leaders of the world, the false security of the world, deceitful riches, pleasure, crowd, etc. Then letter B, actively aim for a relationship with God and try to think like God does. And 10 possibilities there of things that will help you love God with all your mind. Keep your mind on spiritual things, not fleshly things. Cast down the imaginations, take them captive. You're going to have to take them captive with the Lord's help. You ever have your thoughts run wild? Of course you have. We all do. The only way to solve that is to, Lord, help me. I need to bring this captive. Don't let your mind be corrupted. Number 4. Number 5, don't fulfill the desires of the flesh and the mind. So you may wake up or get done with break and have a desire. Don't follow it. Don't chase it. Don't fulfill it. Don't walk like the world walks in the vanity of the mind. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And then again, the Romans 12:2. The way that God is going to use to transform you is by the renewing of your mind. And this is a lifetime process of renewing. Number 8, let the mind of Christ be in you, walk humbly before God and man. Philippians 2, just follow this example. And number 9, live by God's laws. And Hebrews 8:10 is talking about our in our minds, that God has placed in our minds, but I think we have to go broader than just our conscience. Because so many times you'll hear somebody say, well, my conscience is clear. I don't have to answer to you, I answer to God. And I'm thinking, you really want, you're ready to stand and look in God's eyes and tell him that what you did was the right thing? You're sure about that. Something off. But they've twisted their conscience.
I had a guy in Nova Scotia, he said to me and God, if you want to recognize that's a problem, we have an agreement. And the conversation really,
Arm yourself with the same mind as Christ, etc. Page 6 is Philippians 4:8. Pastor Brown referred to it in the first message. There's positive, but then Paul touches, went through it negatively. This sometimes helps me to see the other side of it, to turn it over, and to think, okay, so whatever is false, I got to stay away from. Whatever is dishonorable, and he develops those as well. So if you're choosing a verse or two that you want to just take with you, write it out and take it with you, this would probably be a good one. And whatever is true on this chest, etc. So work at actually molding your mind and transforming your mind around good things. Page 7 were some other considerations, and there's way too much information for you, but the red things are maybe some bullet points. Where do you get your information? And that was this McCracken book that I gave you the outline to. What is truth? How do I find it? Is the road trip to truth I referred to. Worldview is an interesting thing to chase through. Studies about worldview are changing constantly, I think, because worldviews are changing so constantly. But you can at least say there's the postmodern, which is there is no truth, or my truth, etc. But not all people have the postmodern. Now it's postmodern, where my truth is absolute truth, and you have to affirm it, which is not postmodern. Postmodern is you do your thing, I'll do mine. You do you. That's postmodern. There's New Age, what was called New Age 40 years ago. Now they sometimes call it New Spirituality or Eastern religions. this mysticism type of thing. There's a lot of that going around today. So developing worldviews is really interesting. But Jeff Myers under Worldview, and this was 7 years ago that he wrote it, but 5 questions everybody has. Anybody you meet on the street, am I loved? Why do I hurt? Why does my life have meaning? Why can't we just get along? Is there any hope for the world? And then he goes through 5 key worldviews and then the answers that they give to those questions. An intriguing study. Identity politics is huge. Satan is using that very, very much in today's world. You know, how people identify themselves and then demand that you affirm them in their identity. And this is where the transgender mess is coming in. And then perspectives on influence of culture on us, several books relating to that. One kind of side issue, but it's very much shaping America, is what you would call wokeness, or I don't even know what to call it. You know, diversity, equity, inclusion, the racial, whatever. I don't even know what to call it. But, so I put several books there for you on that. And then on thought life. Some of the Puritan writers of the 1600s were amazing as it related to being helpful about our thought lives. Never heard of a TV, never heard of a cell phone, but just helping us think through carefully. But a lot of their wording was just way above my comprehension. And then there's several people. One guard is one, The Enemy Within. He's kind of reworked a lot of John Owen's stuff in very helpful ways. And then Vandegrift, In the Arena of the Mind, his whole book is basically walking you through Philippians 4:8 and how to practically use that. Other comments? Hope that helps you, just give you some handles to grab hold of. Yes, sir.
You're trying to convince somebody of something to the mind. I think sometimes if you can help bring them to a conclusion and then make them think that they figured that out for themselves, then kind of like talking with them rather than talking at them. It sometimes can get further than
Yeah. My observation is that more and more, you can't just win an argument. Winning an argument is almost like winning a battle and losing a war. I was thinking of a verse, 1 Thessalonians 2:13, where Paul is telling the Thessalonians, I thank God, because when you received the word of God that you heard from us, you received it not as the word of man, but as it is in truth, the word of God that effectually works in you that believe. So if you have a conversation with somebody, maybe it's somebody you work with, maybe it's a family member, and they come back next week and they say, well, you said this and you said that, I haven't accomplished my purpose. If I can take them to the Bible and say, here's what God says about this, and here's what God says about this, and if they come back next week and say, well, the Bible said this and here, and the Bible said that, now I've accomplished something. Now it isn't my opinions that we're arguing about. Now it's them against God. And really, that's what we're up against in our world today.